So welcome to my early or first thoughts on the Trails series in general, and I'm playing right now Trails of Cold Steel, the first game in the Cold Steel arc, and I'm about 40 hours in, so I have a lot of thoughts I want to share with you on this incredible game. So, like a lot of people, I was intimidated by the Trails series. There are about a dozen games in the series. There is all kinds of discourse online about where you're supposed to start in the series. Pretty much everybody thinks you need to start at the absolute beginning of the series, which was Trails in the Sky on the PSP. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to start there. But from what I can see so far, you probably do want to go back there as soon as you possibly can. The interesting thing about the Trails series, or the Legend of Heroes series, is that all of these games present an interconnected world. There is more world building and more character building in this series than any other series that I have ever experienced. Over the course of the dozen or so games in the series, there's just so much lore to discover, and if you pick up in the middle of the series, you can still play those games as I'm doing right now, but you're going to miss out on a few references. So, one of the best kind of layouts that I've seen is if you're having a problem going back to some of the more primitive games in the series, those early Sky games on the PSP, you can start with the Cold Steel arc. And Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 2 are relatively self-contained stories. There are obviously references and callbacks to the earlier stuff, but nothing that's really going to leave you missing out on a bunch of information that you should have. However, when you move into Cold Steel 3 and 4, it becomes much more interconnected. So it's suggested that if you are going to start with the Cold Steel arc, that you start with 1 and 2 for Cold Steel, and then go back and do the Sky trilogy and the Crossbell duology. That's 5 games, and they're all a little bit more in the sort of 2D overhead perspective type games. Still very good games with very similar combat, but a little bit more primitive, if you will. These games continue to have fantastic combat systems that build on each other from game to game to game. Now, because of this, I have gone back to Trails in the Sky. Over here on my ROG Ally, I have Trails in the Sky 1 and 2 installed, and I have started to play 1, and it is quite a delightful game, but it is a little bit more difficult because the combat is not as massaged, the difficulty is not as balanced as it is in later games. But let's get into my thoughts of Cold Steel. Now that you know the layout and structure of this series, and why I started where I did was because I was able to pick these games up brand new sealed, which I showed in a video a couple of months ago at my local game store, and I just decided to dive in where I had the games. And let me tell you, within 5 or 6 hours of playing Cold Steel 1, I was so hooked on this game that I went out and bought all the rest of the games that I could. So I picked up, as you saw, Cold Steel 3, Cold Steel 4, and then the next game that follows it, Trails into Reverie, and the game after that, Trails into Daybreak. And then I also picked up Trails, The Legend of Nayuta Boundless Trails, which is a side story. I believe people suggest playing it during the Cold Steel arc somewhere, like fitting it in wherever. It's a side story in that kind of era or whatever. All of these games happen within, a 10 to 20 year time span. So they all feed into each other, and the characters come and go from the series. But let's talk about Cold Steel 1. As I said, I have hit the 40-hour mark right now, and the craziest thing with this game was that it started out with a foreshadowing moment. As soon as you launch the game, you launch into a mission and your characters are like level 50 and you have all kinds of crazy powers. There's some, crazy stuff going on. Everybody's, freaked out about something that's going on, some political event. There's, I won't spoil it for you, but it starts out on a high point. It starts out, pumping full of adrenaline, and you think, okay, this is crazy. And your first taste of combat, you have all these crazy powers and different moves and area of effect attacks and directed attacks, and so much cool stuff. And it absolutely hooked me right from the first minute. And then after about 20 or 30 minutes, it stops and throws you back in time 6 months, and you're these students in a military school, and you have to go through the sort of day-to-day life of a student in a military school for a part of the game, and you get some of the backstory on your characters unraveled because of that. And this game is broken up into a rhythm of kind of 3 parts where you're spending some time in the school simulator similar to the Persona series, and then you spend some time working on your skills. You have a segment of the game where you go and explore kind of a local dungeon that's local to your area, and you go a little bit deeper and deeper and deeper in that dungeon every time you go in. And then you have some little mini quests around the school, helping out students and things like that. And then you go on essentially a field trip. There is a calendar system in this game that is very similar to the Persona calendar system, where you'll skip ahead a day or two or a couple of weeks to the next major event. And every month you have what they call a field study or a field trip, where you get a group of your students together and go on this field trip. You get a different mix of characters. There are 9 playable characters, I believe. At this point in the game, they do keep adding other characters here and there. And each mission that you go on is usually a different mix of those characters, and you get exposed to a larger portion of the world around you. You get exposed to some sinister plots and conspiracies, and the battle between the nobles and the commoners and the imperial government. There's so much going on in this game, and it's so intensely intriguing. You get to travel to all these crazy, unique places, so many exciting things to discover, so many different environments, big cities, small towns, the countryside. You get to ride these trains, and just it's such an adventurous game. There's so much to discover, and they do some really crazy things for a PS3 title. Now, this is also on PS4, and you can get in a couple of other places as well, like Steam. Excuse me. But for a PS3 game, they do an amazing job of making it feel really bigger than the limitations of the console would suggest. The way they show like a big city, they break it up into quadrants, and you have to travel to different areas of the city via like a tram trolley sort of thing, and it makes it feel much bigger than it really is. And certain sections, like when we were out in the Highlands, a certain part, and you got to ride a horse and travel all through the Highlands and stuff. Really great sense of adventure. Now let's talk about the combat system. This is turn-based combat, and it's some of the best turn-based combat I have ever played. It is instantly intuitive, which is the greatest thing for me, because I really hate complicated battle systems. Now, there are some complicated systems in terms of equipping your characters that takes a little bit of time to understand and really build out your characters the way you want them to. But the combat itself is very simple. As soon as you enter combat, you have the choice between basically a basic melee attack with whatever weapon is on your character, or a choice of either arts or crafts. Crafts use CP or craft points, so you can only use them so often, but those tend to be where your area of effect attacks are, and some of your special attacks. And then arts are very powerful attacks which control MP or consume MP. You can only use so many of those, and you really want to save up for the bigger bosses, if you will. You can regenerate health with potions and things like that. There are potions to regenerate CP and all of that kind of stuff, but they are kind of hard to come by. So you do want to save some of your special stuff for the bigger enemies, for sure. Depending on the difficulty that you are playing on, there are multiple difficulties here, from, very easy to nightmare hard. I'm choosing to play up the middle in the kind of normal difficulty, and I do not find the game all that difficult at all. It's quite easy, except for some of the bosses can be major damage sponges. And there has been a couple of times where I've had to play a boss twice in order to figure out, how to best manage all of my different powers and things like that to do the most effect. There is also something called a link system, where you and another character, you can link two sets of your characters, because you usually have 4 in your front line party that are actively battling. So you can link 2 sets of characters together, and when one does like a knockback attack, another will jump in automatically and do some bonus damage, which is super cool. So all of these little systems that you put in place help you to get stronger and stronger. You can also upgrade your weapons. After every major segment, every major field study, you have some kind of free time to run around the school, and you can go to the Ore Bowl factory, the place where they upgrade weapons, and you can buy a new weapon, and then you can use some of the materials that you got from killing monsters to upgrade those weapons. So every section of the game, every month of the game that you go through, you get a little bit stronger. You level up, your AP, and you level up your characters, and it's very, very, very interesting. I can't wait to see how this game ends and how powerful my characters are going to be at the end of this arc. And basically, these 2 games are 2 halves of one story. So I'm expecting Cold Steel 1 to end on a cliffhanger that leads directly into Cold Steel 2. I don't know how the characters are going to progress throughout this series, but the thing is, I've been playing this game for about 2 months now to get to that 40-hour mark, because I really only have, if I'm lucky, maybe 5 or 6 hours a week that I can really put into a game like this. The one thing with this game is, although you can save relatively anywhere, there are large scripted sections of the game smattered all over, and normally when you get into a play session, you have to be prepared to spend more than an hour, closer to 2 hours, to really accomplish the next step in the game. And there are large sections of cutscenes and, in-game engine, scripted dialogue scenes and things like that can literally run on for 30 to 45 minutes of just clicking through dialogue, watching cutscenes, and doing little mini things like having conversations with different party members, and maybe playing the in-game card game while you're riding on the train or something. And sometimes those scripted sequences can add up to 30 to 45 minutes where there is no option for you to save and quit. So you do have to commit usually a couple hours to a play session in order to really get anywhere in the game. But that's not necessarily a downside for me. It just means that with my work schedule, I can't really commit to booting up the game unless, I have an early night at work or a day off. So I'm only playing two or three nights a week. But anyways, guys, I would really love to hear your perspectives out there. If you have played the Trail series or any part of it, what did you think about this series? Let me know down in the comments below. Am I crazy for starting where I am? You know that I am trying to go back to the Trails in the Sky games now. I have those on Steam, and I will be trying to go through those as well. But what order would you suggest? I've been thinking about going through Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2, and then going to Legend of Nayuta, and then making sure that at that point I have caught up with at least Trails in the Sky 1 and 2. And I don't know about the Crossbell games, where I'm going to fit those in. Most people say you should play those as well before you move into Cold Steel 3 and 4. But I'm just so excited to be playing these games right now, and so happy to have been able to find all of these games and build out this collection. But I think I'm going to be playing this series for legitimately probably 4 to 5 years to get through all of these games. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoy this Trail series as much as I am beginning to. It's becoming rapidly a first love, right up there with the Persona and Shin Megami Tensei series. I think it's rapidly becoming one of my absolute favorite series of all time. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Stay classy.